summer morning, a young mother set out with her 2-year-old son for what was supposed to be a quick hike in the Rocky Mountains. They never returned. For years, officials believed they had gotten lost or suffered a tragic fall. But no remains were found, no gear, no trace, just silence. Then 6 years later, everything changed. During a thermal research project near a remote hot spring off the Cascade Trail, scientists recorded something strange beneath the surface. What they discovered would reopen a case long thought forgotten and shake everyone involved to the core. Mark Brennan was sitting at his desk when the call came, a number from Colorado. He almost didn't pick up. "Mr. Brennan, this is Detective Patricia Chen," the voice said. "I need to speak with you about your wife and son." His heart stopped. After 6 years of nothing, no updates, no leads, no one called anymore. "What did you find?" he asked, barely able to speak. The detective hesitated. "We believe we've recovered items belonging to your wife near Morning Glory Pool. I think it's best if we talk in person. Can you come to Colorado?" Mark didn't need convincing. He was already pulling up flight options, hands shaking. That morning from 6 years ago flashed back. Sarah had asked if they should cancel the hike because Mark was sick. He told her to go without him. Their son Ethan had been so excited to see the bubble water. Now that same place had given up a terrible secret. When Mark asked what they'd found, Detective Chen mentioned fragments of clothing, pieces of hiking gear, leather that might have come from boots, and something else. Organic matter. They needed DNA testing, but the implications were clear. "And Ethan?" Mark asked quickly. "Did you find anything that could have belonged to my son?" "That's something we need to speak about in person," she replied carefully. "The conditions in thermal springs complicate recovery." The moment he ended the call, Mark packed a bag and started making arrangements. He walked past the photo wall Sarah had created, snapshots of their life together. Hiking trips, laughing moments, Ethan on his shoulders at Garden of the Gods. The three of them by that very same spring, just 1 year before they vanished. And now he was returning to that same place, not for a vacation, but to face what was left behind. As Mark drove toward the airport, just 2 hours after that life-altering call, his thoughts kept circling back to the researchers. Imagine showing up to study mineral activity, only to uncover the fragments of a 6-year-old mystery no one had solved. According to Detective Chen, it was metal traces that first caught the team's attention, likely remnants from a backpack frame, boot hardware, or maybe even Sarah's wedding ring. The titanium one Mark had worked overtime to buy, the one she never took off. The flight passed in a haze. Out the window, the Rocky Mountains rose into view, those same peaks Sarah had fallen in love with. She'd grown up in flat, open Ohio, but the mountains had lit a fire in her soul. Even after Ethan was born, she insisted they keep hiking, modifying trails and gear to accommodate the baby. Always prepared, always careful. And yet, this. Mark couldn't stop thinking about the question that haunted him the most. What had happened to Ethan? He was just 2. Could anything of his survive in boiling water over all these years? As the plane descended into Denver, he leaned his head against the window, knowing whatever answers awaited him weren't going to bring peace. But maybe they would bring truth. Detective Patricia Chen was waiting at the airport, precisely as composed as she had sounded over the phone. Practical clothes, steady eyes, no small talk, just a quiet "Mr. Brennan," a handshake, and the offer of a ride. During the drive west, the mountains seemed to grow taller, heavier. What once felt majestic now pressed in like a weight. "The research team has been cooperative," she said finally. "Dr. Emily Reeves is leading the project. They found the site 3 days ago while sampling for geothermal data." 3 days? Mark repeated. "You've had this for 3 days?" "We needed to confirm several things before contacting you," she answered. "The hot spring complicates everything. We brought in specialists to help preserve what we could." Mark stared out the window. "Did they find anything that belonged to my son?" Chen's hands gripped the wheel tighter. We're still working. The spring is deeper than expected, almost 40 feet in the center. The temperature limits our divers' time below. But yes, we've recovered several items. They continued in silence, passing familiar places. Georgetown, Loveland Pass. Every turn of the road twisted the knife a little deeper. That's where they'd gotten engaged. That's where they used to stop for snacks with Ethan. Now, it all led to this. When they arrived, the trailhead was closed off, surrounded by emergency vehicles. Yellow tape flapped in the breeze. Officers nodded as they passed. The hike to Morning Glory Pool had never felt longer. As they neared the spring, Mark heard voices, machinery, the distant hum of generators. Then, around the last bend, it came into view. Morning Glory Pool, still breathtaking, still a circle of vibrant blues and greens, but now surrounded by tents, equipment, and divers in thermal suits working from a raised platform over the edge. A woman in a mud-streaked university jacket approached. "Mr. Brennan, I'm Dr. Emily Reeves. I'm so sorry. We were taking bacterial core samples when our gear registered metal. By protocol, we had to investigate any interference." She guided him to a tent nearby. Inside, items lay neatly arranged, each labeled and cataloged. Mark's knees weakened as he stepped closer. A corroded backpack frame, purple fabric barely hanging on. It was Sarah's. He remembered how she'd researched that model for weeks. The weight distribution, the durability, it was unmistakable. "We believe the frame is what triggered our equipment," Dr. Reeves said gently. "Its depth and angle suggest it didn't fall there by accident." Mark blinked. "Wait, what do you mean?" Detective Chen stepped forward. Her voice was quiet, but what she said next would turn 6 years of grief into something far more disturbing. That was the part they still couldn't explain. Detective Chen led Mark to another table under the evidence tent. This one held what remained of Sarah's hiking boots. Despite the harsh environment, some parts had survived. Inside, the orthotic insoles she used for her high arches were still visible. Next to them, her car keys, metal fob and all, and in a separate bag, the titanium wedding ring, the engraving still intact. To the summit and back, M&S. It was their joke about enduring life's highs and lows. Now it read more like a prophecy. Detective Chen explained what they were beginning to suspect. "The condition and position of these items suggest your wife entered the spring fully clothed, with all her gear. That's not common for an accident. Most falls are partial. A foot slips, someone leans too far for a photo. But this was full immersion." Mark could barely process it. Sarah knew these trails. She was careful, obsessive even, especially with Ethan. "I know," Chen replied. "That's exactly what makes this so troubling." There was more. The research team had discovered that Morning Glory Pool wasn't just another shallow spring. Beneath its colorful surface, it had a narrow vertical shaft, one that extended far deeper than previously recorded. Items could drift to different depths, meaning evidence was likely scattered, which led to the next unspoken fear. If different parts of what remained were found at different depths, what exactly had happened? Mark tried to focus on the investigation. Were there any other hikers that day? Surveillance? Trail registers? Chen nodded. "We're going back through everything from July 15th, 6 years ago. Your wife signed the log at 8:47 a.m., but this trail system is huge. Intersecting paths, hundreds of visitors. After all this time, finding anyone who remembers that day will be difficult." Before she could say more, one of the divers shouted from the platform, urgency in their voice. Chen rushed off. Mark stood alone, surrounded by the last belongings Sarah ever carried. Her steel water bottle, still mostly intact. Her GPS watch, her snack bag, her hiking gear, all carefully laid out like pieces from an ancient excavation. But as he scanned each item, one thing became painfully clear. Nothing of Ethan's was there. No toddler shoes, no child carrier, No toys or snacks, not even the sippy cup Sarah never left home without. The absence hit harder than anything else. When Chen returned, her expression was unreadable. The divers found more material at greater depth. We'll need time to extract it safely, but Mr. Brennan, we still haven't found anything linked to your son. Mark swallowed hard. What are you saying? I'm saying it's possible Ethan wasn't in the spring at all. That moment changed everything. For 6 long years, Mark had believed both Sarah and Ethan were gone. But now, this one detail cracked that certainty open. For the first time in years, he felt something that scared him more than grief ever could. Hope. If Ethan wasn't in the spring, where had he gone? Who had he been with? And what really happened on that trail? We're reopening the case, Chen confirmed. This is now considered a potential criminal investigation. We're interviewing park staff, regular hikers, anyone who might have been near the trail that day. It's a long shot, but someone might have seen something. And if Ethan was separated from your wife, there's still a chance. The next morning, Mark arrived early at the trailhead, where a temporary command center had been set up. Folding tables covered in topographic maps, dozens of search and rescue personnel in bright vests, radios crackling, helicopters in the distance. Detective Chen handed him coffee and a neon vest marked family. She didn't need to say anything. They were all thinking the same thing. Morning Glory Pool had hidden one tragedy for 6 years, but maybe, just maybe, it hadn't buried both. We're organizing grid searches along all possible routes your wife might have taken, Detective Chen told Mark the next morning. But this time, it wasn't just a missing person search. This was now a potential crime scene. They were checking every structure within a 5-mile radius, emergency cabins, ranger sheds, even old mining shelters. Any building where someone might have directed a young mother and her toddler during an unexpected shift in weather. Mark took a sip of the bitter coffee she'd handed him, grateful for the heat more than the taste. He remembered how Sarah used to mark the location of every shelter on her maps, just in case. She was meticulous like that, always prepared. That's when a tall, weather-worn park ranger approached. His name tag read Tom Mitchell, and he looked every bit the seasoned outdoorsman. Radio gear clipped neatly, eyes sharp, posture calm. Mr. Brennan, he said, nodding respectfully after Chen introduced them. I remember your wife. Always signed the registers properly. Noted her return times. The kind of hiker we wish more people were. Mark blinked. You remember her? Hard to forget someone that consistent, Mitchell said. She hiked here often, sometimes with you, sometimes just her and the little one. Then, to Mark's surprise, Mitchell pulled out a small, battered notebook. When I heard from Detective Chen, I went through my old maintenance logs. Turns out, I was on duty that exact day, July 15th, 6 years ago. I was servicing the backcountry shelters. It's all logged, but I don't think anyone connected my schedule to your family's disappearance at the time. Detective Chen leaned forward. You were in the area the same day Sarah and Ethan vanished? Mitchell nodded. Started at Timber Creek Shelter that morning. Then worked my way down to Pine Ridge and Avalanche Creek. Rain rolled in that afternoon. Not heavy, but enough to send unprepared hikers looking for shelter. Mark's breath caught. Sarah was always prepared, but with a toddler, even light rain might have made her head to a cabin. Chen frowned. Were the shelter logbooks ever checked during the original investigation? Mitchell and Chen exchanged a look. They were probably checked for occupancy, Chen said slowly, but I'm not seeing notes about reviewing the actual written logs. I have them, Mitchell said. The Park Service wanted to toss the old logbooks during renovations 2 years ago. I kept them. Figured they were part of the park's history. An officer was immediately dispatched to retrieve the records. Meanwhile, search teams were assigned. Mark joined Mitchell's group. They would revisit the shelter cabins, this time with fresh eyes. As they hiked toward Timber Creek Shelter, Mitchell pointed out trail features with ease. Your wife knew these trails, he said. She'd have known exactly where to go. She did, Mark said between breaths. She always had a plan B when Ethan was with her. Eventually, the Timber Creek shelter appeared through the trees, a modest wooden structure with a metal roof, no more than 12 by 16 feet. Mitchell unlocked the heavy door, revealing a sparse interior: wooden bunks, a small stove, some emergency gear, and metal containers. "Prints, fibers, anything," said one of the forensic techs, snapping photos as he moved through the room. "We'll collect what we can, even after 6 years." Mark stood in the doorway. It felt surreal. He pictured Sarah here, maybe turning the storm into a story for Ethan, their own secret cabin adventure. He used to call these places camping houses, wide-eyed and full of excitement. Beside him, Mitchell added quietly, "These cabins are supposed to stay unlocked in case someone needs shelter, but sometimes hikers accidentally lock them, or the latch sticks. I remember double-checking all the locks that day because of the incoming weather." They moved on, toward the next location, Pine Ridge Shelter. Another wooden outpost, but this one perched higher, offering a clearer view of the valley below. Every cabin, every mile, every memory they uncovered pulled Mark deeper into a story he thought had ended long ago, but the search was just beginning. At the next shelter, the CSI team resumed their work, carefully documenting the space, while Mark tried to see everything through Sarah's eyes. What route would she have taken if the weather had turned? Where would she go with a tired toddler and storm clouds overhead? "Mr. Brennan," Ranger Mitchell said, flipping through his notes, "did your wife usually take the same trails, or did she like to explore?" "She explored," Mark replied, "but not with Ethan. New routes she always checked alone first. That day, I remember she mentioned wanting to take him to Alpine Meadow. It's off the upper loop, past Morning Glory." Mitchell's brow furrowed. That would have put her closer to Pine Ridge or Avalanche Creek if rain came in, not Timber Creek. That's in the other direction. As they made their way toward Avalanche Creek Shelter, the most remote of the three, Mark noticed Mitchell occasionally paused to scan the trail. Even after 6 years, he still read the terrain like a language he never forgot. "It must feel strange," Mark said, "having something like this happen somewhere you know so well." Mitchell was quiet. Then, "Every ranger faces hard calls, lost hikers, accidents, but a mother and child just disappearing? That sticks with you. Every time I walk past Morning Glory Pool, I think about it. It's too beautiful to hide something so awful." Avalanche Creek Shelter came into view, a simple wooden cabin tucked into a silent clearing, the forest pressed in tight. Mark noticed the lock on the door looked newer. "Had to replace that 4 years ago," Mitchell explained. "The old one kept jamming." As the CSI team began documenting the interior, Mark felt something different here. It wasn't just the location, it was the quiet, the way the creek muffled sound, the thick trees. It felt isolated. "If Sarah came here with Ethan," Mark said quietly, "and someone else was already here." "These shelters can sleep 6, sometimes 8, Mitchell replied. "If weather's bad, hikers share. Most people are good." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. While searchers fanned out through the surrounding woods, Mark walked to the edge of the creek. The icy water rushed past, fed by snowmelt, unbothered by human stories. Somewhere out here, his wife and son had been separated. Someone had done something, or seen something, or knew something. The question was, after 6 years, had those secrets vanished just like Sarah? Then came the call. Detective Chen's radio crackled. Mark turned in time to see her expression shift sharply. She raised her voice. "They found something at the ranger station. We need to go, now." The hike back felt like miles of tension. Chen moved fast, her urgency spilling into every step. Mitchell stayed with Mark, offering a steadying hand when the trail turned steep. "What do you think it is?" Mark asked. "Could be anything," Mitchell said, but his voice had lost its earlier ease. "The station has areas no one's really gone through. If someone connected to the staff was involved, when they reached the station, the scene had changed completely. The lot was now a full-blown crime scene. More patrol cars, evidence tape, investigators combing through the building. Detective Chen met them at the entrance. We obtained a warrant to search employee lockers and common areas. We started with active staff, then moved to older unassigned ones. She led them through the public area into a hallway Mark had never seen. Along one wall stood metal lockers, some wide open, others now tagged with evidence markers. "This one," she said, stopping in front of locker 47. "It hasn't been assigned for 4 years. It belonged to Jake Morrison, a seasonal employee who left suddenly in 2019. We cut the lock. Inside was darkness, and behind a false panel, they found something hidden. Evidence bags now sat on a nearby table, a silver necklace with a small compass charm, a white gold wedding band with tiny diamonds. Mark's knees nearly buckled. "That's Sarah's," he whispered. "The necklace. I gave it to her for our 5th anniversary. She wore it every hike. Said a compass meant she'd always find her way home." Detective Chen's voice was grave. "Someone went to great effort to conceal these." Mark repeated the name slowly. "Jake Morrison. Who is he?" Mitchell had stepped closer to the table, his eyes locked on the items. He didn't speak, because whatever answer came next would likely change everything. "I remember Jake," Mitchell said. "Mid-20s back then. Kept to himself. Knew the trails like the back of his hand, but never connected much with people." Mark's mind raced. What did he look like? "Brown hair, average build, a bit of a loner," Mitchell replied. "He stayed in the employee housing for 2 summers, left suddenly in 2019. Said something about a job in Utah. Never heard from him again." Detective Chen had already pulled up records on her tablet. Jake Andrew Morrison, born April 3, 1994, worked here during the summers of 2018 and 2019. No criminal history, but she scrolled. Her expression darkened. "He's dropped off the grid. No current address, no job history, no credit activity." "He's hiding," Mark said, eyes locked on the evidence table, on the necklace that once rested at Sarah's collarbone. "He killed her and vanished." "We're issuing a nationwide alert," Chen replied. "Every agency will have his name. Mr. Brennan, can you confirm these items?" Mark stepped forward, then paused, remembering not to touch. "That necklace. It's Sarah's. There's an engraving on the back, our initials, the date." Chen rotated the bag, revealing the inscription, M&S, always find your way home. 2015. Mark swallowed hard. She never hiked without it. Said it brought her luck. "If Morrison kept these as reminders," Chen said carefully, "it tells us something about his mindset." "But why leave them behind?" Mark asked. "Why not take them when he ran?" Mitchell answered softly. "These lockers are rarely checked. Most sit untouched for years. He probably thought they'd be safe, maybe even planned to come back for them someday." As the crime scene team processed the locker, Mark glanced through the open doorway into the break room. A coffee pot, old safety posters, a cluttered fridge. How many times had Morrison sat there, planning? Had he returned from killing Sarah and calmly poured himself coffee, ate lunch with coworkers, as if nothing had happened? "Mr. Mitchell," Chen said, turning to the ranger, "we'll need a full report. Anything you can remember. Conversations, odd behavior, anything." "Of course," Mitchell agreed. "But honestly, he was so quiet you barely noticed him." That comment stuck with Mark. A man who knew the trails, knew the shelters, could disappear into the woods and move without being seen. Someone who could vanish a mother and child, and no one would even remember him. "We need to search the staff housing," Mark said, "even if it's been years." Chen nodded. "Already in motion. If Morrison left anything behind, we'll find it." Mitchell excused himself to continue maintenance, promising to send anything he could remember about Morrison. As he walked off, Mark noticed a limp in his step. Years of hiking had carved wear into the man, but his dedication never faded. He'd stayed late, helped with the search, never hesitated. Outside, Mark stood alone in the parking lot, staring at the mountains. They had a name now. A man. A possible answer to a 6-year nightmare. Jake Morrison. Quiet. Unremarkable. The kind of person no one remembers until it's too late. He encountered Sarah and Ethan on the trail, Mark said aloud to Chen, who had joined him. He did something, killed her, hid the body, and kept her jewelry like souvenirs. Chen was quiet. But where's Ethan? Mark pressed. How do you hide a 2-year-old for 6 years? That's what we intend to find out, she said. The fact that he kept those items, it tells us he didn't want to forget. And if he took Ethan, she trailed off. But Mark heard what she wasn't saying. If Morrison kept the necklace, maybe, just maybe, he kept the child. Maybe Ethan was still alive, raised by a man who never should have come near him. The image of the compass necklace burned in Mark's mind. Sarah's good luck charm, a symbol of always finding your way home. Instead, it had been locked in a forgotten locker in the hands of a killer. Now it might just be the key to finding Ethan. I want everything you can pull on Morrison, Mark said firmly. Photos, work history, anything. If he has my son, I need to know who I'm dealing with. We're compiling it now, Chen said, but you need rest. Go back to the hotel. This investigation is just getting started. But rest wasn't possible. Not now. Not when they finally had a lead, finally had a name. Jake Morrison had made one mistake. He kept Sarah's belongings, the necklace, the ring, hidden but not gone. That one error cracked open the case after 6 long years. Mark could only hope there were more mistakes waiting to be found, mistakes that would lead them to Ethan. When he returned home that evening, the house felt emptier than ever. It was 9 p.m., and the familiar walls now echoed with silence. No laughter, no toys scattered across the floor, no Sarah calling from the kitchen. Just stillness. He dropped his bag at the door and headed straight to his office. If he couldn't physically be in Colorado searching, he could at least do something, anything. Online searches for Jake Morrison brought up very little. No social media, no forwarding address, no credit activity since 2019. It was like he disappeared on purpose. Mark's phone buzzed, a message from Detective Chen. Teams checking Morrison's last known contacts in Utah. Updates in the AM. He set it down and opened his notebook from the trip. Reviewing every detail, every quote, something felt off, and then it hit him. Mitchell. At the Avalanche Creek shelter, he'd said the lock had been replaced 4 years ago, but Jake Morrison had already left the park a year before that. How did Mitchell know the exact year without checking records? Maybe it meant nothing. Mitchell was head of maintenance. Of course he'd remember that kind of thing. But when Mark replayed the entire day in his head, more details tugged at him. Mitchell never strayed far from the investigators. He volunteered early and stayed late. He remembered Jake Morrison clearly for someone he said was forgettable. And then there was that strange comment. Such a beautiful place to hide something so terrible. Not where something terrible happened. Not what a tragedy. But hide, a word that implied intent, planning. Mark stared at his phone, thumb hovering over Detective Chen's number. Was he really going to say all this out loud? That the man who spent all day helping, who had driven the search with tireless effort, might not be who he seemed? He pressed the call button. Chen here. Detective, it's Mark. I know this might sound strange, but I've been thinking about Ranger Mitchell. What about him? Small things? The way he talks? The things he remembers? He's been really helpful. Maybe too helpful. A pause. It's not unheard of, Chen said carefully. In small communities, some local officials get overly involved in open cases, but I'll have someone quietly look into his background, just to be thorough. Did he say or do anything that stood out to you? Nothing concrete. I might just be reaching because we're desperate. I've learned not to ignore family members' instincts, she said gently. We'll check his records, including where he was on July 15th, 6 years ago. Mark ended the call feeling slightly foolish, but also relieved. At least someone would check. He moved into the kitchen to make coffee, knowing sleep wasn't coming. Not tonight. That's when his laptop dinged. New email. Sender T. Mitchell. Subject. Information about Jay Morrison. You should see. Mark's pulse jumped. He'd forgotten they'd exchanged emails during the shelter searches. Still, something about this felt wrong. He opened it. Mr. Brennan, I've been going through old staff files and found something I think Detective Chen needs to see right away. I'm back in Denver tonight for a meeting tomorrow morning. Could I stop by briefly? I have work logs that show Morrison's assignments the week your wife disappeared. Tom Mitchell. Mark stared at the screen. Why now? Why not call Chen directly? Why bring it at night? And why bring it to him? His instincts were screaming. But what if Mitchell was telling the truth? What if this was the break they'd been waiting for? He could call Chen again, ask her to be there. But would that seem paranoid? Mitchell was a respected ranger, 15 years on the trails. He'd helped every step of the way. Maybe it was just fatigue, desperation. Maybe this was nothing. Mark took a breath, placed his hands on the keyboard, and typed, "I'll be up. Coffee's on if you want some." Sometime later, headlights cut across Mark's living room window. He peeked through the blinds and saw a Park Service truck pulling into the driveway. Ranger Mitchell stepped out carrying a manila folder and a small, sealed evidence box. Mark opened the front door before Mitchell could knock. "Thanks for coming. Come in." Mitchell entered calmly, his demeanor easy, confident, like a man with nothing to hide. "Hope I'm not intruding," he said, "but I figured you'd want to see this tonight." "Coffee?" Mark offered, leading him into the kitchen. "That would be great. It's been a long day." As Mark poured 2 mugs, he could hear Mitchell rustling papers behind him. The ranger had already made himself at home at the kitchen table, spreading out what looked like official documents. Cross-referenced Morrison's trail work logs with assignment records, Mitchell began. "Turns out he was scheduled for maintenance on the Upper Loop Trail the day your wife and son disappeared. That would have placed him near Morning Glory Pool." Mark turned, setting the mugs down. The table was covered with paperwork, schedules, logs, sign-in sheets. It looked authentic and damning. "This is incredible," Mark said. "Why didn't this show up in the original investigation?" "Bureaucratic mess, files in different departments. Things get overlooked," Mitchell replied, sipping the coffee. "But here's the part that matters. Morrison requested that assignment. He switched with another worker. He wanted to be there." Mark leaned forward. The theory made sense. The paperwork backed it up. It painted Morrison as a planner, a predator. He took a long drink from his mug, letting the heat jolt his tired system. "We need to send this to Detective Chen right away," he said, reaching for his phone. But something was wrong. His hand felt heavy, his head light. The kitchen tilted. Mitchell kept talking, calm and measured. "You know," he said, "Morrison always felt like a perfect suspect. Too quiet, too neat. The guy who disappears just when everything goes wrong." Mark blinked. The room swam in and out of focus. The mug slipped from his fingers and hit the table, coffee spilling across the papers. "What did you—" "I'm sorry, Mark," Mitchell said, his voice suddenly distant. "You shouldn't have called the detective. I saw her taking notes about me. Can't have that." Mark tried to stand, but his legs collapsed. He slumped sideways as Mitchell caught him mid-fall with ease. "Don't fight it," the ranger said softly. "It's just a sedative. We have a drive ahead of us, and I need you calm." Then came the words that sliced through the fog like a blade. "You're going to see your son again, Mark. Isn't that what you wanted?" Ethan. His son was alive. Mitchell knew where he was. Mark tried to speak, to scream, but his mouth wouldn't work. Everything faded to black. He woke slowly, as if surfacing from a deep lake. His head throbbed, his mouth was dry, his body ached. When his eyes finally opened, he didn't recognize the room. A cold, rough wooden floor beneath him, hands bound behind his back, ankles tied. He remembered. The coffee, the ranger, the cabin. Dim light filtered through grime-covered windows. The walls were made of old logs, filled in with cracked concrete. A cold stove sat unused in the corner. The air was thick with dust, sweat, rot. And then, "You're awake," Mitchell said, seated in a chair near the door, still in uniform, calm, steady. As expected, the dosage was measured. "You've been out for about 3 hours." Mark's voice was dry, cracked. "Where are we?" "My grandfather's old hunting cabin," Mitchell replied. "About 15 miles from the nearest trail, completely off-grid. I've thought about selling it." but it turned out useful. He knelt and checked the zip ties around Mark's wrists. Tight, efficient. Can't have you slipping out just yet. Mark looked up at him, his voice steadier now. You killed Sarah. Mitchell's expression hardened. That wasn't supposed to happen. He stood and walked to the window, staring into the blackness of the forest. None of this was supposed to happen the way it did. And then he said something Mark couldn't forget. Rebecca and I, my wife, we tried for years. No luck. 5 years of waiting, hoping, and then 3 miscarriages, Mitchell said quietly. The last one almost killed her. That was just a month before that July. Mark lay on the cold wooden floor, wrists bound, ankles tied, his mind burning. So you stole mine? Mitchell turned toward him, eyes pleading for sympathy that would never come. I didn't plan it. He began pacing, caught in the memory. There was a storm. I was checking shelters. Your wife, she ran into Avalanche Creek with Ethan. Thunder everywhere. She was scared, asked if they could wait it out with me. His voice softened. Ethan was perfect. 2 years old, blonde hair, called me Mr. Ranger like it was the most important title in the world. He played with my radio, pretended to call for backup. Sarah laughed, said he loved anything with buttons. Mark's voice was a growl. You sick bastard. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, Mitchell snapped, the calm slipping. But then she mentioned you weren't expecting them home until the next day. No one knew exactly where she planned to hike. The storm had worsened. Sarah, always cautious, had made the right call, stay the night with her son in a safe shelter. She didn't know she had walked into a trap. I called Rebecca, Mitchell continued. Told her I met a little boy who needed a real home. Said his mother was reckless, dragging him into a storm. Mark's heart pounded. Sarah was the most careful person he knew. She was kind, Mitchell added. Listened to our story, said she was sorry, but of course she said no. He didn't need to finish. Mark whispered, his voice hollow. You killed her? Mitchell's voice flattened. A sleeper hold, quick, no suffering. He stared at the floor. Wrapped her in a tarp. Used rocks. Carried her to Morning Glory Pool before dawn. Took the jewelry. I thought it would help build a case later. Blame someone. Plant it. Jake Morrison, Mark said bitterly. Wrong place, wrong time, perfect scapegoat. Mitchell's lips twitched. Exactly. Kept the evidence for years. When they found Sarah's remains, I knew it was time to point the finger. Where's my son? Mitchell checked his watch. Rebecca's bringing him now, and the supplies we'll need to handle you. Mark froze. She's known everything from the beginning, Mitchell continued. Helped me change his name, dyed his hair. She's been his mother ever since. His voice softened. We call him Owen now, Owen Mitchell. He's happy, Mark, smart, loves soccer, wants to be a ranger like his dad. He doesn't remember Sarah, or you. As far as he knows, we're all he's ever had. Outside, tires crunched on gravel, headlights cut through the trees. They were here. Stay calm, Mitchell warned. She's bringing the tarp, the shovel, the lie, and Ethan, Owen, is in the car. One sound from you, and he'll see something no child should. Mark lay still, his pulse a thunder in his ears. A woman's voice called out, light, casual, then a boy's. Deeper now, older, but unmistakably Ethan. The door creaked open. A woman in her 40s stepped in. Gray strands in her pulled-back hair, eyes that were sharp, cold, controlled. She dropped a duffel bag onto the floor. The clink of metal inside chilled Mark's blood. Is he secure? She asked. Mitchell nodded. Tight as can be. Where's Owen? In the truck. iPad in his lap. I told him we're checking for mice. She opened the bag. Folded tarp. Bottles, gloves, more. Mark couldn't breathe. They'd planned this, rehearsed it. Should have done this years ago, Rebecca said, when he started asking about the other woman. Mark's stomach turned. He was starting to remember Sarah. Through the filthy window, Mark could just make out the boy in the truck, face aglow from the tablet screen. Even with darker hair, even from this distance, that was Ethan. Mitchell watched the bag. Good thinking with the iPad. How long will it keep him busy? At least an hour, she said, pulling on gloves like she'd done it 100 times. Where are we taking the body? There's an old mine shaft, 3 miles north. Straight drop, floods in spring. Even if someone finds it. He didn't finish. Mark stared at them in disbelief. You've done this before? Mark choked out a single word. Others? Rebecca laughed, a cold, hollow sound. Just one. A hiker saw too much 5 years ago. Recognized Owen from a missing child poster at a gas station. Her expression didn't flinch. Tom's not the only one who protects this family. We're a team, Mitchell added, moving to unroll the tarp with methodical calm. Partners in everything. He looked straight at Mark. When I brought Ethan home that night and told Rebecca what had happened, she didn't hesitate. She said we'd been given a gift, and we'd do whatever it takes to protect him. Mark strained against his restraints, panic flooding his chest. His son was right outside, playing games, unaware that his real father was tied to a cabin floor and that his so-called parents were preparing to erase him forever. Please, Mark begged, you have him. You've already taken everything. Just let me go. I'll disappear. I won't tell anyone. You can keep your lie. But Rebecca's voice cut him off. You already told the detective you were suspicious of Tom. That was your mistake. She leaned in. You should have left the past buried, like your wife. Then came the sound that changed everything. Multiple car doors, slamming, fast. Rebecca spun to the window, her face instantly pale. Someone's here. Police. Multiple vehicles. Mitchell cursed and grabbed his rifle. How? How did they find us? Through the window, Mark saw them, officers moving into position, and his heart jumped. Then sank. Owen had stepped out of the truck, confused, alone, staring at the flashing lights, frozen in the middle of it all. The iPad slipped from his hands and crashed to the ground. Owen! Rebecca shouted, trying to keep calm. Get back in the truck. The boy just stood there, trapped in the confusion. Police loudspeakers crackled to life. Tom Mitchell, Chen's voice rang through the trees. This is the police. We have the cabin surrounded. Send out Mark Brennan and the child. Then exit with your hands visible. Rebecca's voice hissed. How did they find us? Mitchell peered through the curtain. His phone, or maybe his car. Chen must have been watching. She knew. Mark's chest filled with something new. Hope. She had believed him. She had acted when he went silent. Outside, Owen's small voice trembled. Mom? Dad? What's happening? Mitchell barked. Get him back in the truck. But Rebecca was already moving. Owen, sweetheart, go get back in the car, okay? Lock the doors. Stay down. Through the window, Mark watched as his son ran, terrified, back to the truck. Officers held their ground, careful not to escalate. Mitchell's voice shifted, tense, focused. We can still make it. There's a back road. The old logging route. If we can get to the truck. Rebecca cut him off. Tom, we're surrounded. Then we negotiate. From the floor, Mark laughed bitterly through cracked lips. Negotiate? You murdered Sarah, kidnapped Ethan, killed a hiker. What exactly are you negotiating with? Rebecca's foot slammed into his ribs. This is your fault. If you'd just let it go. Mark spit blood. If I'd left my son with his mother's killers? Never. Mitchell checked his rifle with mechanical speed. They don't know about Stevens, he muttered. They ruled that hiker's death an accident. If we... His phone buzzed. Caller ID, Detective Chen. Answer it, Rebecca said. Put it on speaker. Mitchell hit the button. Chen's voice came through, calm and direct. Tom, this doesn't have to end like this. Send out Brennan. Let's talk. Mitchell's eyes narrowed. There's nothing to talk about. You're basing all this on the wild accusations of a desperate man. No, Chen said firmly. We have evidence. Sarah Brennan's jewelry, your fingerprints, not Morrison's. Footage of you accessing that locker multiple times. Rental records showing you were here, not on the trails. July 15th, 6 years ago. Mark watched their faces shift, Rebecca and Tom, as realization hit. They were trapped. Mitchell's voice dropped. What do you want? Send out Brennan and the boy. Then you and Rebecca walk out. Hands up. It's over, Tom. Don't make this worse. Worse? Mitchell let out a bitter laugh. You want to take our son? Chen's final words rang through the speaker like a verdict. He's not your son. He's Ethan Brennan, and he deserves the truth. Rebecca snatched the phone from Mitchell's hands. That boy doesn't even remember his birth parents, she shouted. We're the only family he knows. You want to destroy his life? Chen's voice came through steady and sharp. You destroyed his life the moment you murdered his mother. Then her tone softened. Rebecca, I know you're scared. But think about Ethan. Do you want his last memory of you to be this? A shootout in the woods? Let him remember the good days, not this. Mark watched Rebecca's face twist, grief and fury bleeding through her composure. For 6 years she'd lived the fantasy, a child that wasn't hers, a stolen piece. But it was unraveling, fast. There were no good times, Mark shouted toward the phone. Every birthday, every bedtime story, every laugh was built on Sarah's death. You're not his family. You're the people who took his mother away. Mitchell raised the rifle, fury in his eyes. One more word. Suddenly, a blinding spotlight cut through the cabin window, and in that moment of chaos, they heard the unmistakable sound. The truck door opening. No, Rebecca screamed, spinning toward the window. Owen, stay in the truck. But it was too late. Through the haze of fear and flashing lights, Mark heard a voice he hadn't heard in 6 years. Mom? Dad? I'm scared. The police officer said to come to him. Mitchell turned, confused, rifle swinging wildly. Rebecca lunged for the door. Mark rolled sideways, throwing his bound body into her path, just as Mitchell fired. The rifle cracked, wood shattered. The bullet missed, but only barely. Shots fired! Someone yelled outside. And then, tear gas. The windows blew inward. White smoke flooded the room. Coughing, screaming, chaos. Rebecca stumbled, clawing toward the door. Owen, she sobbed through the smoke. My baby. Strong hands grabbed Mark and pulled him from the floor, out into the night. He gasped for air, fresh, cool air, as tactical officers swarmed the cabin. Mitchell and Rebecca were wrestled to the ground, their screams cut off by commands and handcuffs. Chen appeared beside him. Ethan's safe, she said. He's in the ambulance, shaken up but physically okay. Mark's arms burned as the medics freed him, the circulation returning in painful jolts, but he was already moving. He had to see his son. He stumbled toward the ambulance, and there, on the bumper, wrapped in a blanket, sat a small figure. A boy, his son. A female officer knelt beside the child, whispering softly. Mark slowed. He didn't want to startle him. Owen looked up, confused, frightened, his voice a whisper. That's him, the man they had tied up. Is he a bad guy? Mark froze, his heart cracked. Behind him, Mitchell and Rebecca were being read their rights, still screaming, still denying. But all Mark could see was the 8-year-old boy who didn't know him at all. No, sweetheart, the officer said gently. He's not a bad man. He's been looking for you, for a long time. The boy blinked. Looking for me? Why? Mark knelt down, slowly, keeping his voice calm. Because I love you, he said. And I've missed you every single day. Owen, Ethan, glanced between the stranger kneeling before him and the 2 adults being loaded into police cruisers. Everything he believed was unraveling. Mark didn't move, didn't reach out. He let the boy breathe. Let him try to make sense of a shattered world. They said you were bad, Ethan whispered. They said, I know, Mark said gently. They told you a lot of things that weren't true. That's going to be really hard to understand. But I promise you, we'll figure it out together when you're ready. Around them, sirens blared, radios crackled, officers gave statements. But in that moment, there was only a father and a son, separated by 6 years of lies, finally reunited, and the long road home had just begun. Later, as Mark sat with Chen, she gave him the full breakdown. The Mitchells are being processed at county, she said. Both are facing charges for murder, kidnapping, conspiracy. Tom broke down completely during booking. Rebecca's still insisting they saved Ethan. She's delusional, Mark said, his voice hollow. Chen nodded. Tom confessed. His version matches what he told you in the cabin. He killed Sarah at the shelter. Rebecca helped cover it all up, dyed Ethan's hair, staged the adoption, kept him hidden. Mark's hands tightened. And the hiker? The one who recognized Ethan? Chen's eyes darkened. That was Rebecca. She pushed him off the cliff. Tom created an alibi to protect her. Mark stared out the window of the hospital, where Ethan slept under supervision. But why Morning Glory, he asked. Why take Sarah there? Chen's voice was quiet. because Tom knew no evidence would survive. No one would look there. And for 6 years, they were right. Until now. He went back 3 nights later, Chen said quietly. During one of his regular patrols, Mitchell had known exactly what he was doing. He needed a place where the body would never be found, or if it was, nothing identifiable would remain. Morning Glory Pool. Deep, isolated. The extreme heat and mineral content would destroy DNA, fingerprints, everything. Mark felt a wave of nausea. While he'd been searching desperately, posting flyers, begging strangers for help, Mitchell had been returning to the scene, choosing the perfect place to erase Sarah. Rebecca handled the adoption paperwork, Chen continued. She had distant connections in family services, just enough to know how to forge something that looked real. They told neighbors it was a private arrangement, and once a year had passed, the search died down, and Ethan's hair had been thoroughly dyed. They started introducing him as their own child. They planned it together, Mark muttered. His voice shook with grief and disbelief. And they still think they were good parents. They do, Chen replied. They insist they gave Ethan a better life, that they saved him. Psychologists are already reviewing their case. The results will be complex. So what now? Chen nodded toward the window overlooking the therapy room. Supervised visits, gentle reintegration, a slow, child-led process. He'll need time to unpack the truth. Mark stepped closer to the glass. On the other side, Ethan sat curled up in a chair, arms wrapped tightly around himself. Dr. Martinez sat nearby, along with a social worker offering gentle encouragement. But Ethan wasn't talking. He just stared at the floor, distant and hollow. Everything he believed had collapsed in a matter of hours. Can I see him? Mark asked. Dr. Martinez hesitated. He's been asking about the Mitchells, wondering if they're okay. He doesn't understand yet, but seeing you might help him start to reframe things. He doesn't see you as his father yet, but he doesn't see you as a threat either. Mark entered slowly. Ethan looked up. His eyes, so familiar and yet so distant, moved instantly to the social worker, seeking safety. Mark sat across from him and didn't try to move closer. Hi, he said quietly. I know this is confusing. I just wanted you to know. I've been looking for you for a long time. If you ever want to talk or ask anything, I'll be here. Always. The boy stared at him, not speaking. Finally, he said, The police officer said you're my real dad. Mark nodded slowly. That's true. Ethan's voice cracked. They said, my mom and dad, they killed someone. Mark's heart broke. It's really complicated, he said gently. The doctors are going to help us all understand it together. But the most important thing right now is you're safe and you're not alone. Tears rolled down Ethan's cheeks. But I love them. His voice was small. They read me stories, took me camping, made pancakes on Saturdays. How can people who loved me be bad? Mark didn't have an answer. He simply nodded, then looked to the social worker, his silent way of stepping back. It wasn't the reunion he'd dreamed of, but his son was alive, confused, wounded, but alive. Everything else would take time. As Mark stepped out into the hallway, Dr. Martinez joined him. He'll need you to be patient, she said softly, to let him grieve the only life he's ever known, even while you're grieving the one you lost. Mark didn't respond. He just watched through the window as Ethan, his Ethan, sat quietly, trying to understand the shattered pieces of his world. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be quick. But after 6 years of silence and searching, Mark finally had something he hadn't had in a very long time. Hope